you miss any of these sessions, don't forget that we have those recordings over our YouTube channel, which I'm going to provide you the link in a few minutes. So, before you begin, before I leave the floor to FDMD Jen, let's begin with if anybody has any questions or if anybody would like to come up before we move on to the presentation to provide any suggestions, ideas, to ask any questions. I know that the market is not really very colorful, let's say the least. Everybody is really having a hard time to adjust to these market conditions. But if there's anything in your mind that you would like to come up, please, you're always feel free to come up on stage. I'm following the text channel here, as well as the text channel inside the voice chat. So if anybody would like to have words, just please say it so I can follow it up. So. The floor is all yours, DJ.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. That's a great introduction, JJ. Thanks so much for emceeing this while Ege takes a night off. He had a busy day today, and he's operating on limited sleep. So your presence here and assistance is always appreciated, JJ. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and always good to be here, sir. Always.
Let me slip into my presentation view here. I'll just bring this up and share my screen with everybody. Okay.
Yes.
Everybody would like to tune in.
Yes, if you would like to just see, I hope everybody sees. Just you have to click on the box in order to see DJ's screen right now, guys.
Okay. Without any further ado, I will kick things off. So, yeah, look, for this week's educational series, we'll be touching on the topic of governance. This one gets pretty deep and philosophical. So, yeah, kick back, light up a joint if you're that way inclined, and, deep dive into some mystical subject matter with me. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge the request from the community for a follow-up presentation from Heish regarding stable swap mechanics. I saw a few people asking for this in the Fireside chat earlier on in the week. Look, guys, this is like super advanced algebra operating under the hood of stable swap mechanics. While this would make a great follow-up topic, I had some concerns about the validity of us. Jesus, I'm slurring my words. Sorry if I'm slurring my words, guys. I'm super tired. I had some concerns about the validity of us presenting this to you all. And after discussing with the team, they kind of agreed. After confirming with Heish about this also, he agreed that it just wouldn't really be tenable nor useful for the community. A bit of background here, the formula for executing a simple input-output function across stable math is literally so advanced that Newton's method actually needs to be applied because the polynomial on it is literally so fat that the computations required are so immense, they're too immense for the blockchain to even handle. There is no way anyone who doesn't have a background in advanced algebra would understand nor get any value from it. So just for I guess some comparison or as an example, here's an example of a very, very simplified and condensed equation for input output, on a stable swap. So as you can see here, this is basically 6 pages of algebra condensed into one. And so, as such, while we do our best to adhere to community requests, we also want to make sure that we're actually offering value here to the community and, their ongoing participation with SpiritSwap as a DAO. While this would be a real interesting subject matter to touch on, it would add no tangible value for the community to walk away with. Most of the time, you'd be sort of sitting there slack-jawed wondering what the fuck Heish was talking about, to put it simply. So look, my apologies to those who asked, but it's safe to say that this is kind of like a don't go there situation. Right, with my groveling out of the way, let's push on with this week's presentation.
By the way, guys, just sorry, Dijon, to just barging in, but in short, what he means is that learn some maths, guys, first. This is really important for all of us, and I mean it.
Yeah. Stable math is incredibly complex. The XYK model is like, if you guys kind of were like, what the fuck, but this is kind of cool when you went through the XYK model with Heesh, I can tell you right now, stable math is just a whole other ball game. But yeah, and again, I mean, no offense to anybody here, but I really don't think it would have added any value. It would have been an hour and a half of Heesh and myself waffling on about algebra formula that, like I said, would probably make no sense to anybody. Yeah. So in lieu, this week's presentation will, cover various forms of governance that exist in the crypto space, and this is kind of pertinent to us at the moment as we lead into V2. V2 will kind of see a supercharge effect happen in terms of participation of governance, and as we sort of move towards testing out various forms of governance and building this and implementing this into SpiritSwap's V2 mechanics, I kind of wanted to touch on governance with the community because it's pretty important that you guys understand how all of this works. Not suggesting that you guys don't understand how governance, decentralized governance as a face value works, but I feel it's going to be interesting to touch on some of the nuances and intricacies surrounding these governance models. Because at any point in time, governance models can be changed as well. That's the whole point in decentralized governance. The main factor or overarching factor is that, anyone who is a significant stakeholder can have a say or, push for proposals to be made. These formats can be changed at any time as well. So yeah, cracking on, governance can be kind of boiled down into three main categories, each offering pros and cons with all things in life. So these are centralized governance, DAOs is a form of governance, and then complete lack of governance, which is on-chain governance. So let's dive a little bit deeper into these. So first governance model that we're going to have a look at here is the centralized governance model. The centralized governance model can be defined as a governance model whereby the authority, responsibility, and decision-making power are vested solely within a central body. So this is preferred by passive investors, but requires blind faith around the premise that, the centralized body will always act on the community's behalf with good intentions. But with all things in life, centralization comes at a cost. So let's look at some of the pros and cons here. Some of the pros, pertaining to the decision making is made for you. So a lot of people actually don't want to make decisions on a protocol's behalf. They want to be passive, and that's fine. Some investors prefer to think less and pray that those in control of the protocol know what they're doing and make good decisions on the protocol for the organization's behalf. I guess this would be akin to the TradFi equivalent of a hedge fund in a sense. The next being the ability to step in and offer mitigation or action against bad actors. So by having absolute control, a centralized governance medium have the ability to step in and mediate at any point in time. So this reduces the risk towards investors, giving people a sense of security, I suppose. It can also offer a sense of insurance, opposed to the decentralized format. I guess a perfect example of this is, when Solidly launched, there were a bunch of issues with router hops happening. I actually heard of people losing up to $100,000 due to route paths not executing correctly, and essentially getting wrecked due to low liquidity because these route paths weren't hopping correctly. So, for starters, this wouldn't happen on a centralized exchange as all trades actually happen off chain. So, no liquidity pools to actually have to hop through in order to facilitate trade routes. However, in the event if a user were to lose funds at fault of the protocol or organization, given said entity would be regulated, there would be grounds for this user to receive a refund or be compensated, the lost funds. This isn't the case with a decentralized entity, as there's no central body to really be held responsible for this kind of an action. The next pro is, it can offer layers of security. So again, as mentioned above, with centralized activity taking place off-chain, this offers less chance of typical on-chain security vectors being an issue. However, it is a double-edged sword, as it can mean lack of transparency operating off-chain. The fourth and final pro being accountability, Harry Ye's favorite word. Also as mentioned above, due to regulatory standards, a centralized governance body will usually have to adhere to regulation, which means that, there is a body that's accountable for issues such as user funds lost, at the fault of the host. So this said, it has to be taken with a pinch of salt. It could be argued as a moot point, as there are still many centralized governance systems that exist in DeFi where this really wouldn't apply. So moving on, let's look at some of the cons here around centralized governance mediums. The first being lack of control from the community. So this is a counter argument to decision making being made on your behalf, which is a preferred method by passive investors. Is that you literally have no control over the decisions that are made. So if you don't like a decision, it's kind of like a tough luck. This isn't a democracy. I guess you could argue it's rather seen as a dictatorship approach. The next being adherence, or the need to adhere towards regulatory standards and stringent regulatory standards. You can't really operate in the gray area. Due to regulatory standards, all official centralized organizations have to adhere to these standards, even the crypto ones. An example of this, being a potential threat to freedom is Circle, which is the company responsible for USDC, for those that don't know. Fun fact here is that, USDC actually has a function in its contract that can mean any user's funds can be frozen at any given time as soon as the government produces Circle with a subpoena to do so. So, again, looking at TradFi equivalent, just like those who had their bank accounts frozen for supporting the trucker anti-mandate demonstrations in Canada, you had people who were donating to their Give a Little fund or whatever, and those people ending up with their bank accounts frozen simply for supporting that process. The same can apply to a crypto centralized body. This is a potential threat to freedom and free choice. The fourth point being lack of privacy. So again, privacy is a personal choice. Some people have no issue handing over their details to a centralized body. Others prefer to, execute their right to freedom and privacy. Regardless, furthering to the regulatory factor that I mentioned above, centralized institutions who are regulated, have to adhere to KYC, AML, anti-terrorism funding, and all of that. So this kind of restricts one from being able to execute their right to privacy. And the fourth factor being lack of transparency. So again, unlike decentralized processes without everything actually being enacted on chain, essentially a centralized governing authority can choose which information to make public and which information to keep private. So this reduces transparency and can pose a threat to those involved in the protocol. So now that we've covered the nuances and characteristics of a centralized governance model, let's take a look at some of the decentralized alternatives, and the first of that being DAOs. So the acronym DAO, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, I hope all of you know that, can be applied to and seen as a form of decentralized governance. In its current iteration, SpiritSwap is a DAO. So a DAO specifically is an organization that runs on a blockchain protocol, fully and autonomously in accordance with the rules encoded via smart contracts. By circumventing the need for human intervention or centralized coordination, for example, a developer team, DAOs are often referred to as trustless systems. there are many different types of DAOs who take different approaches towards achieving true civil governance. Truth be told, we're kind of erring on the side of no man's land here, whereby there's no secret source to the perfect structure of a decentralized autonomous organization. In reality, the concept of civil governance is not novel, but the facilitation of a blockchain to actually implement civil governance as a testing ground for various DAO models is. So in this presentation, our aim is to educate our community around the various DAO types, structures, and their purposes, in hope of imparting value to you all around how DAOs operate and, what they strive to achieve. So, what is decentralized governance and how does it apply to SpiritSwap? So at the end of the day, every single InSpirit holder holds the keys to decision making. However, as I mentioned above, in order to work effectively, there are 5 main requirements for this to happen. For the sake of this presentation, I've actually combined and condensed these into 3 requirements, which we'll cover in this presentation. So these 3 requirements are the requirement for community and engagement and participation of said community, the second being effective structure and DAO voting mechanics, and the third being, the fact that a DAO needs a governance token or share system in place. So let's cover these 3 main requirements for a DAO to be effective in its cause of decentralized civil governance, and specifically pay attention to how SpiritSwap DAO is currently tackling these requirements. So looking at the first requirement in detail, community and engagement, engagement is obvious. Without an engaged community, there is no interest to participate in governance, and without an interest to participate in governance, there's nothing to govern. Essentially, it's quite the paradoxical loop.
Dijan, sorry to cut you in there, but I think we're only seeing the first page, or are you reading this from somewhere, or are you just going through from your mind? Because we only see one slide. Okay, this is the second one. Now we see it. Okay, perfect.
Maybe there's some lag happening on my computer at the moment. My apologies.
Okay. Now we see because some of our users said that you may be just reading it from a list because you're just going through so smoothly, but then we realized that it is not actually the case. So yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Go on, please.
If I'm switching, can you see the next slide that kind of has the YouTube logo in there now?
Yes, this is what we are seeing at the moment, yes.
And then I've just switched back to number 1 again. Okay, it might just be a little bit of lag from my laptop. My apologies.
Yeah, can be, yeah. Because we still see the one with YouTube right now, but I have seen the other one. Yeah, I think there's a huge lag. I don't know why, but yeah.
Damn. My apologies. That's super weird. Has it switched back yet?
Now it has switched back right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I know what's happening here. Give me a sec. All right. I'll continue where I was, but thanks for the heads up. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, as I was saying, as Victor Hugo Chukwu quotes, a DAO without engagement is an exercise in futility. There are various ways to engage a community. Some DAOs do this via incentives, and others base their engagement upon the structure of their model. So, for example, a collective drive to achieve a common goal or task, such as the Constitution DAO, whereby a bunch of degenerates essentially got together, formed a DAO in order to purchase a copy of the Constitution. At SpiritSwap, our approach to tackling participation and engagement falls within 2 categories, that being education and the potential to increase financial incentives via stakeholder-driven action. So let's dive into these. So education is simple. The aim is to produce meaningful content for our community to consume and enjoy, but also to ensure that the community, is well informed in decision-making logic to make informed decisions on behalf of the DAO. the main pitfall of civil governance is lack of education, objectivity, and understanding. So to ensure that, this is executed in an effective manner, the SpiritSwap DAO is, offering and has offered a myriad of educational and thought-provoking resources. So some of these include the YouTube educational content that we put out there surrounding support for features that SpiritSwap offers, weekly educational fireside chats such as this one, which is rich and thought-provoking content, and providing the community with an opportunity to have their say in a group discussion by offering opinions, and questioning anything that they want to about the intricacies of DAO procedures. And the third being a platform to float, discuss, debate topical subject matter that's pertinent to, the governance of SpiritSwap. These platforms are supported both by Commonwealth and snapshot programs. So Commonwealth is a platform that supports SpiritSwap DAO. They're an amazing team, a respected partner of ours, and have always been quick to respond to development requests from the SpiritSwap DAO's leadership team. Commonwealth is essentially an incubator for, most community-led governance proposals. The proposals can be discussed and debated before they're actually shipped to a vote on Snapshot. This platform also allows SpiritSwap holders a place to float concepts even if they don't have enough in Spirit to push an official DAO vote by Snapshot. So, by following the How to Use Our Forum guide on Commonwealth, users can actually lobby for support of in-Spirit holders on ideas they have, but may not necessarily have the voting power to push these, proposals. New and old users who want to familiarize themselves with this process can do so via accessing the governance link on our application. So Snapshot is the next. It's essentially the official voting platform of SpiritSwap DAO. After a topic or proposal has had time to be discussed and debated in the Commonwealth platform or, in fireside chats, users who feel they have enough support from the in-Spirit community can officially push a proposal for passing by the DAO via the Snapshot forum. The aforementioned, link that I mentioned earlier goes into explicit detail on best practices for pushing a successful proposal. This pertains directly to policy-driven governance aspect of SpiritSwap DAO. And by this, I mean, the ability to have a say around how the course and direction of the protocol is directly sort of, impacted on and moved around and navigated. How, for example, things like, risk mitigation, development, how a portion of treasury assets is spent, even how the DAO is structured and operates. So, for example, shortening proposal duration timeframes or, reduction of quorum or proposal thresholds, etc. The power is, literally in the hands of in-Spirit holders. You guys just have to take the initiative to grab the bull by the horns, so to speak, and actually start participating. That's going to sound kind of shilly, but I mean, at its current price, for as little as $1,300 locked in perpetuity, you can literally hold the power to make whatever proposal you guys like, amongst the SpiritSwap DAO. So, as more and more protocols proposals are pushed to the community, and the community further adopt and get involved with the policy-driven governance model, there is the intention from our end to ensure that the subject matter and discussions and debates pertaining to these proposals are heavily covered in fireside chats. We just need more activity from you guys making proposals, and we can start, having these forms of, learned discussions. So think of these future, fireside chats as the degenerates version of a decentralized parliament or Congress, except without all the fuckery that goes on in between. So the next important factor is Dow engagement via potential to increase financial incentives via stakeholder-driven action. So essentially, look, money always motivates. SpiritSwap DAO's on-chain governance system ensures that in-Spirit holders are rewarded for participation in our ongoing governance. So this includes our on-chain governance. Without waffling too much, I'd instruct users who aren't familiar with our Gauge governance to refer to our Gitbook documents, a link to which can actually be found in our official resources on our Discord channel. In short, by holding in spirit and further to this, being active in governance around how emissions are distributed each week before the epoch ends, in-spirit holders are rewarded by way of bribes from other protocols to vote on their gauge to drive more emissions to their farms. In-spirit holders are also rewarded passively, by taking a stake in the in-spirit ecosystem via our weekly rewards generated by fees from people who use the DAO's AMM. A third engagement benefit to being an in-spirit holder is just trying to see if that slide's changed. It has. Okay. To being an in-spirit holder, and thus a participant in our governance system revolves around the fact that users actually receive a boost to their farms, which basically promotes further stakeholdership in the ecosystem in itself. V2 updates will add to this model and offer in-spirit holders 2 additional models geared towards financial incentives via stakeholder-driven action. The first model is one that Heish has already discussed in previous Fireside chats, which is essentially the real yield anti-dilution model. Essentially, this it ensures governance participants are never diluted by farmers. This process in itself makes adoption of the governance model even more enticing to new users. The other model is still under lock and key. We have to keep some things around V2 a surprise. However, the latter, in my opinion, which I can't disclose, is the most exciting and rewarding, in my opinion. But we'll touch on that more, a little bit later when we can disclose this information. Effective structure and voting mechanics. So, after a large segue into the first of 3 requirements for a DAO to be successful, let's look into the second factor. So, an effective DAO structure and voting mechanic is also required. This is obvious. Without the necessary infrastructure in place, governance, cannot thrive, or even worse, breaks easily. The aforementioned, actually covered our current voting mechanics already. However, to quickly reiterate what SpiritSwap DAO does to ensure this factor is well covered, the DAO takes a 2-pronged approach to effective governance. Policy governance vote mechanics are managed by a combination of the Commonwealth platform, which is, an in-depth discussion and lobbying forum, and the second being the Snapshot platform, which is, where actual proposal for policy change is carried out. So this approach ensures that there are avenues to have ample discussion around the intricacies and mechanics of proposed policy change before they actually happen. And it basically helps, alleviate wasted time or irrelevant proposals taking place. I guess, an example of this is a recent proposal rightfully called for the reallocation of fees, which, I agreed with the proposal. However, this user evidently didn't follow the proposal path, as the proposal did not pass. Had the person making this proposal actually followed the path, they would have quickly learned, either via discussion on the Commonwealth Forum or raising the idea in Fireside chats here, that basically this proposal was null and void for 2 reasons. Number one, the proposal wasn't possible to carry out as it would require a contract migration, which is basically happening as a part of V2 anyway. The second being that the V2 mechanics in themselves actually offer a much more lucrative and supercharged version, to what this person was proposing anyway. So, after V2, a third arm to the vote mechanics is slated for, and this is full on-chain governance, which we actually discuss in a bit more detail in this presentation. Full on-chain governance, it's a novel mechanic to the ecosystem, and will, in short, allow developers or budding developers or in the know community members to make a pull request to the SpiritSwap DAO's GitHub. effectively, enabling people to directly make changes to the SpiritSwap ecosystem from a code-based perspective. This might be for minor changes such as iterations to fee or emission structure, or larger updates such as actually adding to the SpiritSwap DAO's product suite. In this process, the DAO will then have a chance to review the code in question, and if it passes security checks and gets enough DAO approval upon the vote passing, will actually automatically be added to the code base. So, such a metric actually allows for people to make a vote, to execute a certain function in our smart contracts, like to vote to increase or decrease emissions, vote to change allocation between multiple gauge proxies that SpiritSwap V2 will have, and for things like whitelisting tokens for gauges. Basically, this circumvents the manual and cumbersome process of a snapshot and then manual addition by the developer team. So, this approach not only takes the labor, I guess, out of pushing governance policy, but also speeds the process up as well. So it has multiple benefits. It's pretty enormous, as it allows any governance participant the opportunity to make direct updates to the code base if they have knowledge to do so. So long as safety and security checks are passed, it's entirely possible for you yourself to become the dev. It's also more decentralized, than a multi-sig that puts 7 people in charge of actually signing off on these policy changes. So in a sense, it actually ensures that whatever people vote for will actually happen and come into effect. So again, I have to be objective here, as this model is novel and untested. It doesn't come without threats. It can be a double-edged sword. So proceeding with this model in itself, ironically, will require a DAO vote. But that's a topic for a later discussion. Let's get V2 out first, and then we can sort of touch on those topic points. I guess the point to be taken here is that the SpiritSwap DAO is always looking and always seeking and exploring new ways to add new and exotic herbs and spices, I guess, to the DAO's secret sauce, as we navigate through the intricacies of operating a successful and cohesive DAO. So the third main, I guess, requirement to achieve a successful DAO is a DAO needs a governance token or share system. So yeah, I guess again we've touched on this above. However, it is a point of pertinence nonetheless. For a DAO to actually achieve success, it needs to have a functioning ecosystem with a governance token revolving around it. So in the sake of the SpiritSwap DAO, the governance model bases itself around the in-spirit token, which is tethered to the SpiritSwap ecosystem. By employing the VE model, Spirit tokens are essentially taken off the market and locked away for a specified amount of time, thus thinning out supply. Having, I guess, this sort of symbiotic relationship between participation in governance and a supply thin is beneficial for obvious reasons. However, it should be noted that a supply thin isn't the terminal objective here, but rather a proof of interest in the system of governance in itself. So by this I mean, users actually pledging their Spirit tokens to the governance ecosystem in return for in-spirit tokens is a way for participants, I guess, to, for lack of a better term, have some skin in the game, to marry the protocol in a sense. So, this is a form of, I guess, a preventative mechanism to restrain bad actors. Anyone participating in the governance model has to have a financial stake in the ecosystem, which kind of ensures that, they'll do their best to make good, informed, and positive choices in governance-orientated decisions. Ultimately, what's good for the ecosystem and the governance model that dictates the outcome and I guess prosperity of this ecosystem is good for the participant who actually has a financial stake in the ecosystem as well. So we need to be objective here. There have been many arguments against a DAO governance structure. Also, Andre Cronje has been, very outspoken about his disdain for DAOs, amongst other people. But essentially, these can be boiled down into 5 main factors. These being poor infrastructures, legal battles, navigating smart contract risks, effective coordination or complete decentralization, people or community over profit, or just a bunch of rich folks who are combining to increase their earnings, I suppose. So let's take a closer look at some of these arguments. So first of the arguments is poor infrastructure. So the argument has been made that since DAOs are purely digital and decentralized, they often lack well-developed and efficient infrastructure that their traditional counterparts enjoy. Many DAOs have to design the right tooling and infrastructure by themselves before they launch, and bulk of these tools can be quite quirky. DAOs, they tend to suffer from lacking the right infrastructures or reporting. For things such as treasury management, governance, payroll, communication, identity management, etc. And without the right infrastructure to handle these duties, many DAOs may lose members or even eventually fail to gain traction. However, this said, the increased rate of innovations and collaborations in the Web3 space is gradually helping solve some of these problems. At SpiritSwap DAO, we aim to make use of these emerging tools, as mentioned above, such as Commonwealth Snapshot to navigate these intricacies. At this point in time, what we're doing is working, but we do understand the importance to remain dynamic. And again, we expect involvement and any sort of contribution that the SpiritSwap DAO community members wish to make. If anyone has any better ideas, then we're all for it. So long as the DAO passes it, then that's how this process works. The next argument against DAO governance is legal battles, and this is an interesting one. DAOs, they share similarities to many organizations of today, like corporations, nonprofits, cooperatives. But these organizations are all regulated and governed by the rules of the different terrains that they are rooted in. DAOs, on the other hand, are purely decentralized without a particular location. And the rules governing them are not specific to that of any existing legal framework. In many regions of the world, DAOs really battle with regulatory issues such as taxation of DAO tokens, treasuries, investments, how to get insurance on investments, implementing AML and CFT policies, and ultimately, who takes responsibility for the DAO's actions. So without a clear system to solve these legal challenges, it can be hard for DAOs to gain ground in the physical world. While this area is still great at SpiritSwap, the DAO works with a pretty hefty legal team to ensure that we're operating within the grounds of regulatory standards. However, as we'll discuss further on, the implementation of on-chain governance will even further decentralization of SpiritSwap. But look, we'll cover more on that soon. So the other argument against DAO governance is navigating smart contracts. So yeah, blockchains, may be almost impossible to hack, but smart contracts that run on them, do not completely share the same level of security. Many smart contract networks have faced a series of attacks, with some protocols drained of millions of dollars sometimes. For example, the first DAO known, the DAO, is a typical example of the impact of such vulnerabilities. A more recent event, is I think it was around about $120 million hack of Badger DAO. Essentially, division within a DAO can lead to fragmentation, and as a result, and splits, which we've seen with popular crypto networks. The Ethereum Classic split is a perfect example of this, which was caused by disagreements in responding to the DAO hack. In response of the Ethereum community, puts the immutability of blockchains, in question, I guess one could pose. The Bitcoin Cash hard fork, that was caused by a disagreement in block sizes. So it's situations like these that break the censorship resistance feature, which, attracted so many people to the Web3 space in the first place. However, look, I guess, it could be argued on the flip side that this can help in scaling many projects beyond the limits Web3's good feature of, immutability has placed on them. The current success of the Ethereum network is kind of testimony to this effect. Effective coordination or, complete decentralization is another argument. The governance structures of most DAOs are the typical democratic system of, one man, one vote. While the structure has many advantages, it's not the best way to actually, actively manage cooperations, especially when, decisions that need to be taken require, expertise sometimes. Traditional organizations, function with certain hierarchies because, getting every employee or member to vote on decisions is highly ineffective and, can prove disastrous. Just imagine everyone in an organization needing to vote on an SEO strategy or the code base that a developer needs to use. A large token holder without adequate experience can, very much negatively influence decisions and ultimately the path that the DAO leads. So let's, look at SpiritSwap and how we tackle this in two parts. The first being education. So, an uneducated cooperative leading to poor decisions being made. As we've covered already, the SpiritSwap DAO strives to educate their community as much as possible via, many different educational vehicles. Look, I'll admit this isn't a silver bullet, but, there is at least an effort in place to ensure the community responsible for policymaking and on-chain driven decisions are well informed on the matters and I guess effects of their decision making. The second, I guess point to tackle here that was covered is, large token holders. So let's kind of address the elephant in the room here. There are large in-spirit holders such as the WinSpirit protocols, who make up majority ownership and holdership of in-spirit tokens and thus voting power. And look, like they can sway decisions. The biggest being Liquid Driver. You only have to look at their, emissions in SpiritSwap farms at the moment to see this. Of which, Dr. Liquid has been very vocal around his intentions to acquire and retain a majority share of the in-spirit voting power. Personally, for me, this isn't a concern for two main reasons when you sort of, I guess, really sit back and think about it. And again, I kind of had a chat with Adriana, Dr. Liquid, the other day about this. With shadow farms coming into effect, Liquid Driver will be moving to a gauge model, which will see voting power extended to their holders. Liquid Driver, like SpiritSwap, they hold regular deck talks, which is kind of their version of Fireside to ensure their community are educated and well informed, on the effects of policymaking. The second being, I don't like to use this analogy, but I have seen some people, compare Liquid Driver or convex models, to being parasitic, feeding on its host. SpiritSwap being one of those hosts among other protocols that they actually support. This said, we must understand that they also drive a lot of liquidity and therefore volume our way, which is good for the ecosystem. If you're going to use the parasitic analogy, this is the analogy of a parasite essentially feeding its host, if you will. Further point to acknowledge is, if you're going to consider liquid driver in the sense, the first rule of subsisting is, never kill the host. Or in other terms, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Majority of the time, the liquid driver community, should in theory make good decisions across SpiritSwap's related governance. And as anything that hurts SpiritSwap DAO will ultimately have a flow-on effect to them also. So it's kind of like a mutually assured destruction in a sense. So the third and final governance model that we'll cover today is on-chain governance, or ultimately, complete lack of governance. In an on-chain governance model, on-chain governance rules are kind of hard-coded into the blockchain protocol. So this means that any decision being taken is automatically translated into code. So for example, decisions concerning the increase or decrease of spirit emissions, or, to vote to change allocation between the different gauge proxies that V2 will be supporting, or, vote to whitelist tokens for gauges, etc. One blockchain project which has been working on implementing on-chain governance is Tezos. To overcome the difficulty of unmotivated developers, developers can actually broadcast their improvement proposal on chain. So this is kind of like a roll-on as to how this can kind of work in terms of on-chain governance. Once a proposal gets approved via an on-chain vote, it's then implemented in the testnet. And then after a specified amount of time, a final vote can occur. And, if that vote passes, the proposed change to the code base is then implemented in the mainnet. Just like off-chain governance, on-chain governance does come with various problems as well. In a clearly defined on-chain governance meta system, the system may be, legitimately gamed by some stakeholders where previously unidentified norms, held misbehaving actors in check. The proposed benefits of on-chain governance system is that, it is predictable and stable, so it becomes difficult to argue for meta change once the proposal has been gamed in a sense. More fundamentally, Vlad Zamfir argues that governance problems should not be thought of as design problems, but rather applied social problems, which I tend to agree with. What it means here is that governance is an unpredictable and emergent phenomenon. So therefore, it can't be fully engineered in advance, as it has to keep the flexibility of unplanned occurrences. So to impart with some concluding thoughts of my own, I feel it's all about balance, to be fair. There's definite benefits to all of the aforementioned styles of governance, but as with all things philosophical, there is no right or wrong. The means to achieve the ends must take the goal of the ends into the account for you to find your final path. Personally, I see a combination of balance between both DAO-style governance and on-chain governance as a counterbalancing of each other, as a counterbalancing, I guess, of each other's limitations. Is a viable approach. By this I mean utilizing tools to solve characteristic issues synonymous with DAOs to answer the issues with education for more logical, learned, and information-led decision making. But applying the decision process to on-chain governance, which offers a higher level of transparency and decentralization than the manual and cumbersome DAO process. There's certainly issues, with on-chain governance whereby the tools aren't currently in place to address said issues. However, as I've maintained throughout this presentation, I feel there's no perfect recipe for the secret sauce. The fun part is taste testing as we perfect it. And I personally have faith that as a community, SpiritSwap DAO can navigate throughout these nuances, overcome these challenges, and make SpiritSwap the best damn community-led protocol out there. So with these closing comments, I thank you for your time. I've chewed up a bit of time today, and for some reason my slides have been really screwy, so I apologize for that those have been lagging. When we edit this video out, I'll have the editor sort of fix that up a little bit, and you guys can kind of get back and review this if it's of interest. But yeah, look, if anyone has any questions, I think we can fit one or two in before I have to crash out. I'm literally like struggling to stay awake right now. Sorry, I've been pretty
Man, I mean, in this situation that you have just described us, this was the best, really very, very nice, very informative stuff that you have been going through. And in that situation while you're jet lagged, so wonderful. Thank you very much, Nick. Really, thank you. I really appreciate everything. Guys, if you have any questions or if you would like to come up to chat, just ping me on the chat. And while waiting for some of your input, if you have any, I would like to say that I know that most of the people in crypto are here to earn quick money and to gain, so to make some money out of the system where they do not really need to have any connection with a bank, or they do not actually have any ties with any bank. I mean, they cannot access it, so they found out about DeFi, blah blah blah. So these might be the motivation behind it, but however, DeFi is still on the baby steps. The governance on chain is also in its baby steps. If you are a person who is really looking further into this, you will understand that this is not really all about just making money. These types of governances, especially DAOs, are really very experimental and at a very early stage these days. So whatever Degen has just summarized to all of us, what I find out personally is that it's really very important. But we are still at a very, very early stage where whatever decision we are making to make this happen, someday these can be the rules of the future governance that we may not be able to predict at the moment. You know that these types of things, like, I mean, if you cannot make a revolution happen, then it stays as a dream, just some very nice, good thoughts, just like a dream. But when they actually come to life, and when you see that it actually affects something real, concrete on this world, then these small steps, these baby steps, is the road that will make the payments in order to achieve that goal. So. Yeah, thank you very much, really, Nick. This was really wonderful, and I hope our community really enjoyed it very well as well.
So, yeah, and perfect summary, man. I feel like that kind of is a really good sum up of embodying, I guess, what I've just in my jet lag state, half consciously just waffled through. Again, really apologies for the slide screw ups. This actually sucks because I spent so much time putting these slides together, and I think I skipped through about 10 of them at least. So I'm gutted about that. But I'm currently operating without my usual system. I've usually got multiple screens up, but I'm staying from my in-laws' place in the UK for the next 3 months, so I guess I'll just have to adapt to this new sort of style of operating, which we'll get to eventually. Hopefully, once I get stateside, I'm going to cruise stateside and spend some time working with the guys over in Washington. I'll have a better setup over there. But again, I just want to thank everybody for coming today and listening to this. I hope that you guys have got some value out of it, and it's provoked some thinking there. around, where SpiritSwap is leading, where the DAO intends to take SpiritSwap. And again, JJ, I just want to thank you for your time and filling in today and helping out as per usual. You're an amazing dude.
Of course, as always.
Yeah.
Are you going to share these slides, by the way, by any chance, or is it going to be in the record only?
You know what? I can absolutely. I'll listen back to the recording and try and make like a transcription of what I've said and maybe try and put this into a PDF document or something, so that way there'll be a transcription of what I've said and then also the slides. But again, once I send the recording through to our video editor who uploads this to YouTube, the replay of this will actually have all of the slides. So if you guys want to go back and listen to this replay and kind of make sense of my waffle via the slides, which kind of allude to what I'm talking about, then that will also be possible as well.
Okay. Well, I cannot really see any comment or a question from the community, and I don't really want to make you wait longer in your jet lag situation, Nick. So let's wrap this up. And thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, please.
I guess one last thing. Now that I'm sort of situated where I am and I've got more time to be prepared, next week, we've got content lined up for the next 2 weeks for our Fireside chats. Next week, we're actually going to be getting a cameo appearance on. I'm kind of kicking around with the idea of getting more cameo appearances from not only high profile and well-known people and influencers and educational providers within the space, but also community members as well. Look, if you guys want to jump up on stage and present something one week, I think that'd be a pretty cool idea. But alluding to what I was just saying earlier, next week we're going to have Crypto Clay from Phantom Alerts or soon to be dubbed Multi-Chain Alerts come on. A lot of you guys kind of appreciated a macro discussion that I had with the community a couple of weeks back. Clay is very, very, very well versed in macroeconomics and kind of the broader impacts that they have on the crypto space. So if that's of any interest to you guys, we'll be having Clay on next week. We'll be having an hour-long discussion with him, kind of, informal shooting the shit around, digging into what macroeconomic indicators actually mean for the wider crypto community and price action of the markets. Looking at macro factors like the DXY index and how all of these and equities, I guess, sort of flow onto the crypto space. So yeah, if that's of any interest to anyone, you'll have that to look forward to next week.
Well, guys, now you should not have any excuse to miss next week. That's for sure. Thank you very much, Nick, again, for giving us this presentation and very useful information. Thank you, everyone, for coming in here and for joining in the chat and sharing your time with us. As usual, for the report, you can go to our YouTube channel in a couple of days and listen to the record of this session. But until next week, take care and have a nice week. See you guys. Awesome. Bye-bye.
Thanks heaps, guys. Cheers.